I'm happy to welcome you to Smithsonian Music's program, The Beat Goes On. My name is Dwandalyn Reece, and I'm Associate Director for the Office of Curatorial Affairs and Curator of Music and Performing Arts at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I'm also Chair of the Smithsonian Music Executive Committee. Smithsonian Music is a pan-institutional group of members from all units at the Smithsonian that help to work, raise the profile and the riches that we have at the Smithsonian about music the world over. We're happy to bring this program and participate in the 24 hours event. And without further ado, I promise you a great conversation with a great panel to talk about what music's been like in 2020. And if I can do so, I'd like to just introduce our panelists. First, we have Julie Evans from Chevy Chase Presbyterian. Julie performs organ concerts at venues and festivals across the US, including the Kennedy Center and the Piccolo Spoleto Festival. She has served as choral conductor in residence at American University, as a college lecturer, and is beginning her 14th year as director of music and organist at Chevy Chase Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C. Next up, we have Felix Contreras. He's co-creator and host of Alt Latino, NPR's pioneering program about Latin alternative music and Latino culture. It features music as well as interviews with many of the most well-known Latinx musicians, actors, filmmakers, and writers. He has hosted and produced Alt Latino episodes from Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, and throughout the US since the show started in 2010. Next, we have Katea Stitt from local station WPFW. Katea attended Georgetown and began her career as a performing arts producer in 1987. In 1994, she launched her own company, Anyanwu Management, to offer event, tour, and artist management services to individuals, ensembles, and organizations. Her clients have included Ntozake Shange, Lester Bowie, Sweet Honey in the Rock, and many, many more. She was also coordinator of and oral historian for the Smithsonian Institute's Jazz Oral History program. And since 1991, she has hosted a weekly jazz world music program on the DC Pacifica station, WPFW. One more person, two more people to go. Kokayi Issa, he's DJ, producer, and educator. Preeminent improvisational vocalist, Grammy-nominated musician. He can be heard on the 2020 Grammy-nominated album by Terry Lynn Carrington and Social Science Waiting Game. Whose Hat Is This? Everything's Okay. Gold Lings at What Cost? MTV's Rebel Music. Kevin Hart's Laugh at My Pain, and over 60 recordings spanning jazz, hip hop, rock, and R&B. Kokayi continues to create with his latest instrumental art project, Distant Waves, and continues working collaboratively in bands. And finally, I'd like to introduce Johnathan Acosta, a musician who recently is on an artist visa here in the United States from Venezuela. And we are going to have a short conversation for about a half an hour with all the panelists. And then Felix and Johnathan will have their own conversation so you can get to know a little bit about Johnathan, his music, and his experiences here. So welcome all panelists.
Thank you for having me
here. Happy to see you. And thanks for joining us for what I think will be a great discussion. So I'd like to just start. Here we are, going toward the end of 2020. We've dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. We've dealt with social unrest, legacies of racism and discrimination in our communities, social protest. It's been an environment that's challenged us all, but it's also changed the face of music for most of us, whether you are just a listener, a performer, a radio host, a musician. And I want to have a conversation about what those experiences have liked. How have you changed? How have you been impacted? And so I'm going to start with a broad question. In what ways have you seen your music communities impacted by the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and racism? And just to make things smooth, I will just start with Kokayi.
Thank you for having me. It's been very different, right? I mean, as a musician, I think I'll look at this from two aspects. As a musician who's been working in file sharing and collaborating across the internet, it was not a big change. I've been doing Zoom meetings. I've been doing, sending files and collaborating on records. In fact, working on Terry Lynn's record was Terry Lynn sending me the track and me recording the vocals and sending it back, right? So that part of the process didn't really impact what I was doing at home as far as home studios. It impacted everything as far as touring. So being an active touring musician. The racism, however, is something as a Black person growing up in the United States is something that I've encountered, my entire life. And so watching the music community and watching the creative communities galvanize and other communities galvanize behind protests and things of that nature made me feel good and empowered. But it's like, what do you do at the time when there's COVID in these streets and you can't be unsafe? But at the same time, you have to let your voice be heard in these streets. So a lot of my friends that are musicians took their message digitally, right? And put out new music and put out videos and put out anything they possibly could on social media, and hashtags ran amok and everything else. And some people hit the streets. And so, I've been very proud of the music community and how they reacted.
Thanks. Felix.
Well, a couple of different things. My job is to report on people like Kokayi and within the Latin music community, the people that we cover. When we first started, I started an ongoing series. When the lockdown happened back in April, I started an ongoing series talking to 3 or 4 different musicians from different genres within Latin music about how the lockdown was going for them and what was happening with them. And we did about 3 or 4 shows, and I made podcasts out of them. But the same thing, though, there was a similar experience. It's mainly the lack of performing opportunities that has crushed the community. And when this lockdown happened, like was it March 15 or 16, just that week, the week before, South by Southwest, which happens in Austin every year, had announced that they were going to they're not going to happen. I had booked a show with 6 bands from all over Latin America and the US. And, one performance there, just that whole performance opportunity just disappeared. So again, they've adjusted. A couple of, there's a string player in Los Angeles who did like Kokayi was continuing to able to do sessions, from her home. She's on a couple of soundtracks, stuff like that. One band called Making Movies, they got very active and very political and very forward thinking, and they started doing things online that was a combination of music and activism. So it's, and how they were impacted by the racism or the legacy of racism that was in the music industry in general and the society overall. A lot of musicians just spoke up. We're just releasing our best songs of the year next week. And one of the top songs is a song called Antifa by a French-Chilean rapper named Ana Tijoux, right? So she's, musicians like that have spoken up, have answered the call, and made it part of their artistic expression, right? I play music part-time. We have a little band here in Silver Spring in Maryland. And we were limited to this restaurant where we were always playing, and then we were playing outside. We did it for as long as we could, socially distanced, until it got too cold, and it's, the restaurant, it has a lot of local musicians playing from the neighborhood, some of the younger musicians, but they were a resource. They were a source for musicians to go out and perform and interact and have their music shown, even though it's at the local level. And now we lose that resource because of the cold weather, and we all hope, we got our fingers crossed that she survives the economic downturn. So it's a little bit of both. The jury's still out, but we're hopeful about maybe 2021 bringing better news.
Yeah, thanks. Julie, I want to turn to you, particularly, music in churches is just totally upended everything. And could you talk a little bit about your experience this year?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I think initially, I feel like we've all sort of gone through these stages of grief, the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, the acceptance, and not necessarily in that order. And it's never really completed. But, we found that, the church is not a building. I had not worked much in the digital realm. And so here, and that sort of evolved for me and for my choirs. As artistic director of Chevy Chase Concerts, we were planning our 50th year. And also part of that is the annual Bach Marathon, 45 years of 5 hours of Bach on a Sunday afternoon. And my predecessor, Ken Lowenberg, had been in the position for 38 years. So we have quite a community of people beyond the walls of our church. So trying to recreate the mystery and spirit in worship has led us to, as a staff, to be very, very in tune to each other. I think, and the Zoom online platform has been a powerful classroom tool for us, even as we've accumulated study resources and had hard conversations about racism. I will say a little story. Well, I had already planned some online hymn singing. You have to mute, but you request a hymn, and we were in the third week of it, and the death of George Floyd was right in our face. And that was the time when the community that was online said, completely changed really what they needed to sing in that moment. So that, and of course, and, our great preaching and music, the synergy of that, we're really finding ways to create that space of the Holy Spirit, even through Zoom, through timing, through visual differences. It's not just a PowerPoint screen, video, and the choir is in full session now in the fall, so they're contributing their vocal part to a hymn. And I will say that, and they will all agree that the sum of the whole is greater, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's really hard, they say, to listen to themselves submit a single line of the hymn, but it has, music touches us in a deep way. And we've been showing plenty of examples of lament in the Psalms that we sing. And so we give our congregation time for lament and for joy and for really, sharing what is good and what Christ has brought us here to do.
Thanks. Johnathan?
I'm here.
Tell us a little bit what 2020 has been for you.
Yeah, it was 2020. It was difficult for all, for my music, but I still learning every day. This year it has been a great opportunity for grow out. I came to this country in 2018. I started a tour in the Kennedy Center in January in 2019. 2019, it was beautiful for my music, for my tour, until COVID started. No, after finishing 2019, I renewed my talent visa to continue the tour, but it was canceled. No? After that, we have had to study a lot of and find a big emotional balance, like a musician, like a husband, like a father, really difficult. But I'm trying. I'm working in my new album from home, from my house. Um, I'm made a video for the motivational for encourage the Hispanic community. Um, I also have been make different online concert and another online activity such as broadcast with my social media. The platform will be the opportunity for show my music and my composition. You know.
Thanks. And Katea,
I'm sorry for my English. It's not very well.
please don't apologize. It was fine. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Katea.
Hello, Dwandalyn. Thanks for having us this evening. Happy to be here. And I think I just echo what everyone on the panel has said. I would say that as a tour manager, I tour manage for Sweet Honey in the Rock. Like every other artist, our gigs went away overnight. We've been able to do 3 socially distanced tapings. And so what concerns me is that the artists that either cannot have those kinds of gigs or don't have the resources to record themselves. And in some ways, you know, COVID has been a great equalizer. And in other ways, it has upended and really shown us the underbelly in the country that we have 2 Americas. If we ever doubted it before, we know we have 2 Americas now. And I think that extends to the artistic community, quite frankly. There are those with resources and access that can do more things. And so even during the pandemic and through this pandemic, they'll be seen, they'll be heard, so they can pick up more or less where they left off before the pandemic. And so, you know, I put Sweet Honey in that camp. And then there are other artists that are beautiful artists, wonderful artists, most deserving, that just don't have resources and connections to continue because they are reliant on a club scene. They're reliant on venues. Many of them will be gone by the end of this pandemic. We have smaller venues that I think all of us treasure, and we can start naming them, but across this country and around the world that just won't see the other side of it, which means that it'll limit the opportunities for smaller artists, lesser known artists. When I say smaller, I don't mean in talent. It's like huge talents, but just not as well known, to have opportunities to tour, to record, to perform. And if you don't have those opportunities and you're a performing artist, you don't have a livelihood. Right. And we don't have a system like they do in other countries. I've toured extensively in Europe, for instance, where there is a system to support artists. It's just part of the fiber, whether you're doing well, not so well, whether you have access or a manager or not, you have housing, you have healthcare. You know, your basic needs are taken care of, and there is a subsidy, a real subsidy, not a subsidy that goes through a large venue, but a real subsidy given to artists to do the work that they are put here on this earth to do, just like a doctor or an attorney or an accountant. So, so my heart goes out to my artistic community. As the program director and a host at WPFW, I think that I echo what Julie has said and what others have said. I think Johnathan also mentioned it, that it's a very emotional time. And I know that for me, at the beginning of this pandemic, I really tried to present music to our listening audience. And I think all of our programmers at WPFW did, in particular, since we're talking about jazz that embodied, but really beyond jazz, because you know, jazz is kind of the beginning of everything, right? Like you can go out to so many directions, but music that really embodied solace, that also embodied resistance for the moment that we were in, that embodied a hope, even within the despair, even within our anger. So that's what I've been trying to carry forth. And then in terms of racism, you know, racism touches every part of who we are in America. It is what this country was founded on. So we can't separate what artists go through. I mean, Nona Hendryx has been so, for instance, has been so outspoken on social media. She just did a beautiful project coming from Harlem Stage, but she's been so outspoken on social media about uplifting the racism that many artists have always known was in the music community, whether it's jazz or R&B or avant-garde or world music, wherever you are, it's always been there. It's not new. It's just that now George Floyd's death, God bless his soul, caused us all to be really thrown into a present and a reckoning that frankly should have happened long ago, but is happening now. So the music community can no longer stay silent. Even I noticed in artists that traditionally have really tried to stay away from politics, as it were, even finding their voice. I don't think you can be a Black man in this music, a brown man in this music, and not speak up, because who you see assaulted in the streets could be you, could be your son, could be your brother, could be your uncle. Same thing for Black women, brown women, you know, same thing for our white allies who are now raising the flag and raising their voice and saying enough with white privilege, enough with white supremacy. How are we going to address those things in the music that we create? How are we going to ensure that we're not always the first considered, or we're not always the ones that get the dollars? But how are we going to make sure that equity comes to our brown and Black colleagues? That's what I've seen. And so in that moment, there's great hope and there's great possibility. Having said that, though, I really do worry about what a music community will look like post-pandemic, with so many venues gone, so many artists being, you know, when we talk about, 40 million people possibly being evicted, a lot of those will be artists. A lot of those will be artists. So how are we as a country, how are we as whatever we are in this ecosystem of music going to ensure that, as Dr. King would say, the least of these, those who need the most help, those who are the most vulnerable right now in this artistic community, how are we going to make sure they're okay and that they thrive just as much as those that have everything?
Wow.
I tried to stay within my time. That's why I stopped. I hope that's okay, Dwan.
Wow.
It's amazing.
I think she's frozen.
Uh-oh.
Her internet connection maybe.
Oh no.
Well, that was very impactful, Katea, and it touched on a lot of things I think that a lot of us are seeing all over, you know. And I'm wondering, like, I don't know, I don't want to take it over, but asking questions is sort of comes second nature to me. Given my job. Given my job, I'm wondering, like, for example, Kokayi, like when you say you're able to work with people, like recording independently and then sending us stuff, do you think that if as more people do this, you think that people will, because what happens in a studio is that emotional connection, right? You know, will that impact the music you think that's being made during a pandemic lockdown? And I see Dr. Reece is back, but
Sorry about that. Just put on me.
I think that is definitely, I think there's, you know, I think there's so much emotion that exists right now, right? Everybody is feeling such a way that it's beyond the internet, right? You can be empathetic in your own home, because for the first time, I think this is why it was such a key moment with George Floyd's death, because everybody was finally home. Nobody was too busy to not pay attention, right? So everybody had the opportunity to pay attention. And I think when you have a group of people, they say that people that survive traumatic events together form bonds that last forever, right? And so I think we're going through a space in time where a lot of people are feeling empathetic at the same time. Every musician is going through this at the same time. We all understand exactly what it feels like, right? So I don't think if we're talking about doing music, yes, the in-person connections, if you go and get a COVID test and then you travel and get to a studio that's, following through everything, I think you can definitely have that. But I think at the very same time, if you want to collaborate with somebody, there's a spirit that's unspoken that is shared between everybody who is experiencing the same thing. So I think you still will get genuine emotions and genuine feelings of collaboration because you're going through that, shared trauma.
I have, clock is ticking, but I had a question that I'm going to throw at you. It's a little different than what we talked about before. But what struck me, and we were talking about musicians and making music and venue, but for music, for me, a lot about there's a culture of music, and so much of that culture embodies so many things. And the word community, you either make music in community, you're performing on stage, you're in community with yourself, music making. And the biggest thing for me, even as a singer and a lover of music, there's nothing that beats being next to somebody and singing in a choir or being at a live concert. There's something that, for me, and this may not be for other people, that the virtual space doesn't nourish. And when we talk about all of us, whether you're a kid taking music lessons, those exchanges, let me ask you, what personal experiences have you felt around that, or around the communities that you work with, live with, share? I mean, what have we lost? And is there anything that we've learned that's good out of this situation that we can take into the future?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let somebody just speak up this time.
Yeah, if I would, all too often with my choir heading into a concert or something, because of the state of the community, the nation, the world, that quote of Leonard Bernstein comes to mind. This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, and more devotedly than ever before. And you know what? It's not going to be pandemic, and the lack of feedback, spiritual feedback when we're together singing is not going to be forever.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all at various stages of hope in that realm. But I do believe that, and I'm grateful for the technical experience that I've had, and we will be using some of that in our worship services, but can't wait to get everyone together.
Anyone else?
I just want to say, in terms of the radio, again, right? It's a great medium, because as Kokayi said, the urgency, I think always the urgency of good music, the message of good music across genres, doesn't matter, right? Permeates, that's what touches you. When you listen to, if you're listening on a recording, I still listen to vinyl, I like vinyl, but if you're listening to the radio, think how many people that touches. We all can hear a foggy day in London town and imagine London on that day, a drizzle and the palace, or what I mean, or Big Ben, we can imagine that. So music, wherever it's made, however it's made, will always have the ability to transport. I just wanted to add, and it kind of goes back to the last question, what I have found in our, because I've been to a lot of the demonstrations since the beginning. I mask up, glove up, and I'm out there. And I was out there in the early days in DC when it was really hairy with the guards and this. But one thing that saddened me was the absence of music. And I know that we have protest songs. Kokayi is creating them. You know, so many artists are creating them, right? But this is a movement that's been led by young people. So I hope that we can figure out, one thing I'd like to take into the future is that we figure out a way that this generations, our generations and previous generations who were both musicians and activists, figure out a way to get music back into our protests. Because I also think in terms of garnering numbers, music can change hearts and minds the way nothing else can. A speech can't do it, a phrase can't do it, a poem even can't do it. There's something about, like Bob Marley says, when it hits, you feel no pain. I think that we'd also try to remember, take into the future, the empathy that we've all found in this moment as we move forward, and work from that space when we're dealing with each other, when we're making music, when we're listening to music. Because I think that out of that, we'll come up with some really creative ways to, again, make sure of all of our musical friends, all of our venues.
Thanks.
Very quickly, taking up on the idea of finding creative ways. I mean, very early on, back in March, April, I was having a very difficult time emotionally with what seemed like doom and gloom. And I happened to see an online conversation with saxophonist Wayne Shorter, and they talked about music. And finally somebody asked him, well, how is this virus impacting you? And in typical Wayne, very Zen-like phrases, he just said, all he said was, the virus is a teacher. That's all he said. And that really helped me understand and put everything in perspective. It's like there are opportunities here, like Kokayi was saying, like there are opportunities here to move forward in whatever you were doing, or to even find new things, new ways of expressing yourself. So that has been my mantra ever since.
Kokayi, did you have any response?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's. I agree with everything. I think the one thing that me personally is not, you can't hide your light under a bushel, right? And so in a time like this, anybody that's shining, they can't not speak up. They can't not talk. The things that I miss are the nuances in bands, the secret language that you develop as you travel around and are with each other, the interaction that you have with fans and friends, and, you know, drinks that are shared backstage, or, you know, all of the ancillary things that go along. It's the vibe, right? It's the vibe of the music. It's not just hopping on stage and playing. It's the prayer before you play, you know, it's the sweat after, it's the conversations in the dressing room. It's all of that you'll miss. But I think the thing that has also happened is, like I said, this shared experience has made us tighter in a lot of ways that we never realized. I'm so tight with the band members that I haven't seen in ages, who all want to get back together, who miss each other, right? And sometimes you take that for granted. You go on tour for a month with a group of people, you don't want to see them no more, right? But now that you can't go on tour with them, you sitting here like, yo, what's been up? Like, let me call you and talk to you. Is everything all right? You know, not just work on music, but how is life? You know, and as a person who has a family who spent a lot of time on the road and less time at home, I've grown to appreciate my wife and my kids and my house way more than I used to, right? Not that I didn't appreciate them, but this time has forced me to stop and really look around and be like, you know what? I do need to fix the sink. I do need to go do this. I do need to talk to my kids some more. You know, I do need to, you know, I spend a lot of time on this computer. I need to get up. I need to get on this bike, you know, and do other things that make me a completed human being, that allow me to make the music that hopefully can heal somebody else. I think that's the thing. It's a lot of self-work. You got to work on some self-healing so you can work on those songs that can go heal somebody else.
Well, I've gotten my 3-minute warning. I was going to get to Johnathan, but we're done with the first part of our program. We are now going to switch over for a conversation between Felix and Johnathan Acosta. So I hope you stay tuned with that. but I did want to tell a quick little story. Johnathan Acosta, we just made our acquaintance kind of in an odd way. I just recently moved yesterday, and in preparing for the move, I started giving away furniture and things, and I had a pair of wingback chairs, burgundy red wingback chairs that I acquired a couple of years ago. Acquired, I sound like a museum person. But I was ready to move on. And so I advertised them on Nextdoor, and I got this email from a woman, a friend of Johnathan's, who told me about Johnathan and how he had been here on an artist visa and was trying to play music and was setting something at home. And he was really interested in the chairs. So I heard his story, and the minute I heard he was a musician, and he was going to use them for something, to continue with his work, I just gave them to him. But I heard his story and how he's continuing and striving to make music despite what's COVID and the pandemic and everything else going on. That when we decided to join this 24-hour effort, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to have somebody actually, have a conversation with him. And Felix and I have talked on and off, talked about doing something together. So I had this idea that'd be a wonderful opportunity to talk to Johnathan, have Felix do the interview, and learn something about someone who's having a different experience from all the rest of us. So without further ado, thank you for joining us for part one. And I'm going to turn you over to a conversation with Felix Contreras and Johnathan Acosta.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Good to see you, Kokayi. Katea, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Reece. Hey, Johnathan, one of the things I wanted to start with is to talk a little bit about your experiences here in the United States and with your family back in Venezuela. Like, how are you able to stay in touch, and is everybody safe and healthy back there?
Yeah, my situation is like same the people in the war, around the war. It's same because the situation, the Venezuela situation, is really difficult. Many people are outside Venezuela for economic condition, the political situation is really difficult. But I came to the United States like a musician, First, thank you, Dan and Smithsonian Music, for this special invitation, because this space is a good opportunity for me for speak about my situation and the situation, the Venezuela situation. And thank you again. I believe in the power of the music and art, and I think this time is a good time for work together, for the music, for the art, for our community. My family, for example, write every day to me, thank you, Johnathan, for your music. Thank you, Johnathan, for your concert, online concert. Thank you for your message, because it's a hope for them. It's a hope. It's an esperanza. Every day is a challenge. For day is a challenge for me. It's a challenge. Every day is a challenge for my family. I have only job in this country, like a musician, only job. And when you try mix to both situations, the Venezuela and the United States, it's different. okay, I know it's different, but when you put on the chair or the table, put on the table both situation, um you can see like different opportunity and different way for grow out.
Mhm.
The positive is if you can see one opportunity, one choices for grow out is positive. Okay, it's positive. The situation is really difficult, but I make a decision. I made a decision. Uh, only see the positive. Only see the objective, my goal and our family goal. Um, you know.
Mhm. And I'm going to ask you a question, and si no me entiende, we can do a little bit of Spanglish. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Um, Years ago, when I first started doing this job and interviewing musicians, I spoke to a musician from Brazil, and one of the things he had been living here in the United States for decades, many years, and he told me that uh, he felt at some point when he was living here in the United States, he said living outside of Brazil made him feel more Brazilian than when he was in his country, right? Because lo extraña, he missed it, right? He missed his country, la cultura, the food, la comida, la música, everything. He missed the ambiente of being in Brazil, and it made him feel more Brazilian here in the United States. Is there something similar that happened with you? Do you miss being there, and do you feel more, que siente más un sentido, una identidad venezolano aquí en los Estados Unidos en que estás en tu país and when you're in your own country?
Yes, I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of my food, Venezuelan food. I miss different element of my culture.
Sí.
But this country is very rich in rhythm, very rich in culture, and this country is a good opportunity for to show my culture too, and Latin American culture. When I came to this country, I came for to show my music,
Mhm.
but the Latin American music it's really rich. And when I started working in this country, I meet with a different culture, same same my culture, same my culture. Salvador, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru. um has same same food, same rhythm, same music, but I miss my tradition, my culture.
Sí.
But right now, I have been working for our Latin American culture. Right now, during this year and in the last year, uh, I had been working on the our Latin American culture. My composition um, i- is specific for the integration. I have been to open for to integrate the different culture.
There are there are some roots in Venezuela, some African roots in the music in different parts of the country. and in popular music, but then also in some of the folkloric music. And I think that the African roots of just about all American music here in the United States, I've seen that there are a lot of opportunities for una mezcla, right? Like a mixture
Una
of,
mix.
yeah, a mixture of what happens in the different Latin American countries with African roots, with African traditions, and then here in the United States. What is one form of music, or what is there a musician or an artist or a sound that you discovered since you've been living here that you didn't know about, or that you now know more about? Is there something that's like, wow, este me cae muy bien, this is like very, very nice? Hay algo especial? Is there something very special that made it like, wow, look at that?
Yeah, I have learning about the American culture. I have learning in African American culture is very rich. I love it. I love it. And the African American culture, it's saying our African American, African American, like a rhythm. We have in Venezuela like a Leo, Leo, le, Leo, Leo, la. Leo, 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 la y golpe. Ay, Julián, Julián, Julián José. Repícame los tambores que me lo quiero aprender golpe. It's a rhythm. It's a rhythm. It's a spirit.
Sí.
It's same. In Washington, we have a go-go, the rhythm go-go.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I love it, and I learning about that. Like a musician, this year has been a good experience. Really difficult, but a good and great experience because I can see más allá.
In the distance, in the future, and yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult. For example, my next concert, it will be in December 19, in 1 week. For work, for mix todos los elementos, para unir todos los elementos, ha sido demasiado difícil.
To bring all the elements together for this, it's been very difficult.
Sí, ha sido muy difícil, pero lo hemos logrado con mucha fe.
That you've been able to do with lots of faith.
Con mucha pasión.
A lot of passion.
Y creyendo sobre todo en lo que hacemos.
And believing in everything that you do, that you've done.
Sí, por eso agradezco tanto este espacio.
So you appreciate so much the space.
Sí, porque creo que todavía tenemos muchas cosas por hacer juntos.
We still need to, that we can do things together. Sí.
Yes. He aprendido muchísimo y espero seguir aprendiendo de ustedes.
Then he hopes to keep hoping to learn from all of us. We learn from you, Master. Okay, we're going to make time now for you to sing a song. So introduce the song. Tocamos, huh?
Okay, vamos a tocar algo. My most recent composition is Americano Somos. We are American.
Nice.
Yes, my most recent composition. Canto Argentina, canto a la Argentina como canto a El Salvador, canto al pueblo mío, canto a Venezuela, canto a mi Colombia, Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, las Antillas y Ecuador. Soy de los Andes, de una tierra grande, de verdes praderas, café, pan dulce, playas y sol. Soy americano, como el continente, de muchos colores que hace tan bella toda mi gente. Se oye San Martín, cabalga Bolívar, Sucre que enamora con esos aires llenos de sur. Y allá en Centroamérica, Morazán de Honduras, y el grito de Hidalgo a México lindo un día transformó. Soy de los Andes, de una tierra grande, de verdes praderas, café, pan dulce, playas y sol. Soy americano como el continente, de muchos colores que hace tan bella toda mi gente. De norte a sur o al revés, de sur pa'l norte, como lo ves. De norte a sur o al revés, de sur pa'l norte, como lo ves. Paraguay, qué linda, Chile y Bolivia, Norteamérica, Panamá bailando pollera colorada. De norte a sur o al revés, de sur pa'l norte, como lo ves. Soy americano como el continente, de muchos colores que hace tan bella a toda mi gente.
Bravo, maestro. It's a beautiful performance, and the sentiment of the song for the people who don't speak Spanish yet, for the people who don't speak Spanish yet, it's about America as a concept. It's about America as a continent.
Yes.
And that when you expand, and people from Latin America consider themselves American, and we forget that here in North America, that people are from all of America. So thank you for the song. Thank you for participating in this panel today. My thanks to the Smithsonian Institution and Dr. Reece and everybody for doing this. And I'm signing off, I guess, for the Smithsonian, which is a great honor. I'm Felix Contreras from NPR Music's Alt Latino. Thank you all for listening. Johnathan, thank you for your wonderful music. And everybody be safe out there. Please, please, please be careful. Thank you. Ciao.
Yes.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you, Dr. Reece.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Hannah Grantham, and I am the Curatorial Assistant for Music and Performing Arts at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. And on behalf of the entirety of Smithsonian Music, we would like to thank our participants so much for generously sharing their time with us, and as well to our audiences, you, for joining us this evening and for paying attention to the world going around you and for supporting the arts. With that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you. I echo Felix's sentiments. Please be safe and look out for yourselves and your neighbors. Have a wonderful evening.
Ciao.
You too.